Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. And that brings us to that release which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1165. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1975. And the name of the filmmaker is Michael Schultz. And the name of the work is COOLEY High. This is the work from the year 1975, and it's so great to have this in the Criterion Collection in this new Blu-ray edition. It is a work which is from the story or written by Eric Monti, and it is directed by Michael Schultz, and it has a wonderful cast. So many great performers and actors who are some are professional actors, some are also non-professional actors too, and we'll get a little bit into that discussion a little bit later in this video. But some of the cast members, some of the actors here include Glynn Turman and Lawrence Hilton Jacobs and Garrett Morris and others. This is the work which is, of course, COOLEY High. COOLEY High is so... there's so much going on in this film that is, there's a sense of comedy, there's a sense of the coming of age story, there is this idea of sort of high school hijinks, friends that people meet along the way, little adventures or misadventures of this group of characters that we meet that are, of course, part of this group are the characters of Preach and also the character of Cochise and others, and some of the other members of their group, as it were, in this part of the world, which is Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. And also in a large part in this area of Chicago, which is Cabrini Green as well. And we'll get a little bit to that aspect, which is discussed as part of the supplements. A really fascinating aspect too as part of the supplements. But here we have also slices of life, say the family lives of these young boys who are still students, who are still growing up, but also, as I mentioned, coming of age stories too, because we see part of their, say, adventures or misadventures having to do with meeting girls for the first time, trying to get to know other people, maybe trying to satisfy certain, say, urges or desires that they have in terms of their own growing up, as well as getting into adventures and misadventures of various aspects of the neighborhood that they are in. There are certain, say, hangout spots that they are there in, so they meet other people from the schools, other students there as well, other parties that are happening in the neighborhood at the time, maybe certain activities that might be said to be not totally legal. So they have certain, say, gambling little things that are happening in the corners of certain stores, certain people that say Cochise and Preach meet along the way in terms of these say games that are being played, and also driving at night, and also misadventures in terms of driving in cars and chases as well through empty parking lots and such, as well as slices of life regarding family, regarding, say, hopes and dreams of going to college, things that these students, these young boys, these young men hope to achieve afterwards, and their dreams and their ambitions, and how maybe what they're doing at the moment either by their own choice or volition, or perhaps due to reasons or externalities that are beyond their control, they may or may not be able to find a way out of this particular, say, situation or this particular way of life. And so this is also part of, say, the pressure, the angst of youth and high school growing up, and the future and the unknowns, and whether success will be possible or not. So this is in very many ways this type of wonderfully rendered story of life and of growing up and youth into adulthood, and so that way it's done in a way that's very tender, very has a short story-like structure. So there's these various episodes that occur. That's why I use the word adventures or misadventures, and I use the word misadventures in a very affectionate way, because it's presented in a way that's very affectionate, very caring, very we are with these characters all the way through, thick and thin, and we see the characters engaged in things that are maybe these practical jokes, or things that they're just trying to have a good time, and it's done in a very carefree and innocent manner, which I very much appreciate. There's a type of a celebration of life aspect that's presented in the stories of Preach and Cochise and their interactions with each other. So that's one of the great strengths of this film. Another great strength of this film too is the relationships. It's been described as being a film that is in many ways a type of love story or romantic story in many aspects, in terms of, say, Preach and meeting some of the other characters along the way, Cochise as well, but also the relationship between our main characters of Preach and Cochise. This is in many ways too a love story between these two characters. The bond between these two young men is very, very profound and very moving, and they are deep, deep friends. And so they are deep friends that get into these situations that are perhaps on the one hand done for comic effect, done for sake of a sort of liveliness, but also sometimes there are some situations that have a somewhat dramatic or even serious turn to them. And even in those situations, whether they be light and lively, or maybe they might be significant and dramatic, no matter what the case is, we always see the dynamic of one or both of these characters. And when both of them are engaged or interacting in one form or another, we see a very strong bond between these two. And this is so lovely, and it has a type of spirit and soul that this film carries with such grace and such elegance, as well as a sense of welcomeness. And it welcomes us, the viewers, because these characters are presented in a way that is so dynamic, and also so very loving. And so I find that to be something to be cherished indeed, in terms of a cinematic experience. And the way that these characters are interacting too with the various other people in their lives, in this community, in this place, in the various places, in their homes, and their parents, and the mothers, and the siblings, and the slices of life that we see, the little details. For instance, the letter that is thrown, a little child, what he does with a letter, and the home, and it's done for comic effect. And we also understand that Michael Schultz took this from his own life as well. So there are these details that are embedded in this film that are so, I think, affectionately embedded into and interwoven into the tapestry and the feeling, thus giving the film so much life, and a type of lifeblood, and a type of a spirit that is so endearing, very, very endearing indeed. So that's yet another level where this film operates to, in terms of a type of, say, cinematic experience, both in terms of image and sound. Another great strength too is the way in which the sound and the music is part of the overall landscape and feel and atmosphere. It's a film that is made in '75, but it's also, we understand, it's set in the prior decade of the '60s, the mid '60s, and we understand that from the opening moments of the film. And so in Chicago. And so we have the opportunity, or the filmmakers are then presented with the opportunity to have a lot of great Motown music as part of the soundscape and the soundtrack, which is so great. It has a sense of there's something so magical about the Motown songs that are the Motown songs in general, as well as the songs that are used throughout the soundtrack of this film, that are so uh, beautiful and so poetic, and it also has lyrics that speak to some of the action and consequences of the film, almost like a chorus in a manner, speaking to the drama that's unfolding, as well as having a sense of period and time and place. Also, the sense of life. That's one of the great strengths of a film like Cooley High is it presents slices of life in a way that is filled with life. And that being filled with life is also so endearingly presented in the song choices. And so that's a great cinematic strength of this work. And it adds to the overall warmth and endearing effect to this. Also, too, there is also a sense of another level where this film, I think, succeeds so powerfully, is how it presents what one might call certain, say, social aspects or realities of maybe situations of these students in Chicago and Cabrini Green area, and certain, aspects of life in terms of class and finances. We understand that they aren't necessarily very well off financially. Focusing on the characters like, say, Preach and his family, for example. But it's a film that doesn't focus on, say, the trials and tribulations of, say, families that impoverished situations, but rather it is taking these situations for what they are, and they're presenting them for what they are. And there are some very powerful scenes, for instance, involving the mother and working many jobs, for example, but still and having a sense of almost that type of motherly love and also frustration in the household, but also that's presented in a very direct and honest way, but it's also done in a way that never is feeling, inconsistent with the overall warmth and endearing nature of the film. Indeed, what this is an example of where this film shows a type of directness of truth that is itself very endearing. So, and that way we see this aspect of life of these characters and their particular situation, both in terms of, say, their own lifestyles and way of life, and also in terms of race and race representations and racial relations. And we see this on camera in terms of certain scenes that are depicted, but it's not done in a way that is overly emphasizing, say, aspects of race relations per se, but rather it's making it be part of the overall milieu, part of the overall tapestry, part of the overall aspect of the slice of life that is filled with life. And so I find that that way in which this film has a certain sense of direction and never loses sight of that direction while still presenting what one might call certain realities, and perhaps even certain harsh realities of these characters, Preach and Cochise, for example, but never loses sight of the warmth and endearing nature of the storytelling. I think is so brilliantly realized and so balanced profoundly in a way that makes for very compelling watch. And it's not to say too that this film is, quote unquote, a 100%, say, comedy. It's not to say that all the scenes are 100% played for laughs. There are, as I say, very significantly dramatic moments in this film. There are some moments that are very serious, perhaps even, yes, deadly serious. And there are moments of strong, harsh realities that our characters that we have come to know and love and support and root for. Maybe they are confronted with situations that maybe are beyond their control, or maybe have certain stakes that are elevated in a way that it could be said to be maybe even surprising, or maybe even very, very significant indeed. No matter where the trajectory of the film takes us, though, we are always having with us as a type of say, emotional anchor, as a type of, say, heart and soul of this work. We always have the trajectory of these characters. And granted, too, the characters that we see, for example, Preach as an example, we see him, and we see him doing things that maybe are not always the best choices, and we see certain frailties and maybe even weaknesses of his character, but we never lose sight of the endearing nature of how he and Cochise and others are presented, and how we are then with them and how we are also part of that group, and we are also in many ways as viewers too friends of them as they travel from adventure to adventure to adventure, while also never losing sight of these details of their lives. And those details have a sense of family, have a sense of unity, also have a sense of hope and dreams and aspiration, also a sense of the school life, and also the community life as well, and certain figures in the school life, community life, for instance, the character played by Garrett Morris and others, how these may or may not have certain significant impacts along the way. Uh, it is this slice of life, or slices of life, or slices of lives filled with life, and filled with vigor, and filled with energy, and yes, filled with a sense of earnestness and warmth and coming of age, and a sense of style and celebration that is also very dramatic and very, very engaging. And very, very moving indeed. There are so many emotional beats as well. There are moments of comedy. There are also moments of kind of endearing quality, and also moments of real emotional reaction that are on display, that show the great depth of the command of the cinematic craft in the hands of Michael Schultz, as well as the writing of Eric Monti and others here, as well as the great performances. Glenn Turman and Lawrence Hilton Jacobs leading the way, of course, in terms of their roles of Preach and Cochise, respectively, as well as other great performances here. So this is an overall package that is very that is welcoming, that is also very earnest, that is also so heartwarming, and also very inspiring, as well as keeping in mind the details of the slices of life. And these details can also lead to reminders of certain harsh realities. But at the same time, we are never losing sight of the way in which this is indeed filled with life, whether we are reminded of that through the great use of the Motown music, or if we're reminded of that through the wonderful interactions between characters as they meet other people along the way throughout this, scene by scene, episode by episode, set of adventures of these kids from school, or if it's in the way in which the story is being told, or if it's in the overall feeling and expression and reaction that one feels as a viewer watching this. Or perhaps it's all of the above. Whatever the case may be, we are in for quite a treat indeed when we take this out of the case and put the disc in the player, press play to watch this film, which is COOLEY High. The Criterion Collection has released this film, COOLEY High, on this Blu-ray edition, which is on the table right here, and it is purported to be based on the new restored 4K digital transfer. And just some notes about the transfer, which we can find on one of the pages of this fold-out insert as part of this packaging. I'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later in this video, but it says about the transfer: COOLEY High is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. This new digital transfer was created in 4K resolution on a Laser Graphics Director film scanner from the 35mm original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35mm dialogue, music, and effects magnetic track. Transfer supervisors: Michael Schultz, Lee Klein, etc. So I have seen this film before, but I admit that my experience with this film is very limited. I've never had the great honor of being able to see this film in the theater, for example. And even the way in which I was able to see it before this Criterion release, I admit that I think maybe the transfer or the materials that were based upon those releases might not necessarily have been the highest possible technical quality per se. And so, based on my, say, limited experience with certain versions of the film, I can say that, or maybe keeping that in mind, I say that this release from the Criterion Collection is, for me, so wonderful. And it's really, there's a sense on the one hand of a way in which we see the crispness and the crispness and the clarity of the image, as well as a type of fidelity to the sound, because again, a soundtrack is very important in terms not just of dialogue and the ambience, but also the music, because as I say, the music is also telling the tale. detail, as well as evoking the mood and the period. So that is preserved in such great and loving detail in terms of this presentation, which I appreciate very much. Also, I should point out too that what I like about this, and I've seen this with other Criterion releases from this year, but what I like about this presentation style is that it doesn't feel too overly digitized. I don't know if that's the correct phrasing here, but it feels like it feels quote unquote. It feels like a more, say, delineated presentation, and it feels in that way much clearer than, say, the way I might have seen it in when I seen the film some years back, for example. On the one hand, which I appreciate very much, but at the same time, I can say that for my eye, I feel too that there is a sense of a kind of fidelity and a kind of consistency with a 1970 feel and a 1975 feel to it. It doesn't feel overly digitized, so it feels part of the. It feels like it's still of the period. And I find that to be very important. You know, it needs to have that feel of a type of film or grain, for lack of a better phrase, or it needs to be a sense of a feel of the echo of the room that the characters are standing in as they're speaking their dialogue, or a feel of the way in which, say, sunlight hits the sidewalk or the walls of the buildings, and that has a maybe almost in a very positive way, a type of aged quality to it. And I find that aged quality to it is very important because there's also a sense of nostalgia that's very important, I feel, when I watch this film, Cooley High, because nostalgia is a way in which, you know, we look back, and this way of looking back is also looking back with a fondness of memory, as well as reassessing things that we regret. And so this element of nostalgia, I would assert, is very important in terms of a potential reading of Cooley High. And I dare say, too, that that sense of a nostalgia, I would say, is visibly captured in the way that the print feels in that type of period look to it. And when I say 1970s period look to it. So I admire that very, very much. And so, again, based on my own limitations in terms of my my experiences with this film, nonetheless, I am so satisfied with how this looks and feels. Very, very satisfied indeed. So this is a great place to go. And I'm very happy with this Criterion release. And with this release, like with other Criterion releases, we have not just the film itself on the Blu-ray, but also we have the supplements, which can be found accompanying this Blu-ray. So what are the supplements that we find together with this release of Cooley High, this great release of Cooley High? So first up, we have a supplement which is approximately 35 minutes. This is described as being from the year 2022. And this is Remembering Cooley High. This is a one-on-one discussion between Raquel Gates and Michael Schultz. And this is really wonderful, really, really wonderful indeed. I'm so happy, as always, whenever I see Raquel Gates, and you can tell that she, all the films that she's talking about in the supplements that we find her commentary on, including the supplement for Cooley High, you can tell that she knows the film thoroughly and to every great detail, which makes her a wonderful comments to the film. But also there's this great sense of admiration that she has, and it shows so wonderfully in the way that she's talking with Michael Schultz here. So this is a great conversation, as well as the opportunity, of course, to get to hear from Michael Schultz and to hear his sensibilities and to hear his takes on certain aspects of the filmmaking of Cooley High, as well as other aspects of filmmaking and the industry and his career, etc. So wonderful conversation. So, for example, we have certain comments about the genesis of the film itself, how Michael Schultz came to this film, in terms of his interaction or his being able to come to contact with the story, the Eric Monti story, and then after that occurred, also some sort of behind the scenes details in terms of studio work. American International, or AIP, is also part of the equation, as well as Steve Krantz and Samuel Arkoff as well. So uh, while, of course, another key component of the genesis of this film was the sort of collaboration or interesting relationship between Eric Monty, and Michael Schultz. And one of the things that Michael Schultz mentions here, for example, is how he was really taken with certain aspects of a type of an earnest, direct, biographical, almost biographical nature of the storytelling or the writing. While at the same time, he could identify certain aspects that he could adapt or change or modify. One of the things he decided to do was to remove the profanity that was existing in the original writing. And one of the reasons that he cites, Michael Schultz cites, to want to do this was to, in a sense, make the story timeless in a way. I mean, there's a way in which the use of profanity, it's very important to show a type of period. It's also important to show a type of character, because profanity is language that is used in kind of natural settings, in between and among, say, friends, in school or elsewhere. So it would be another way to show a kind of natural expression of these characters. But what Michael Schultz says here is that also with a similar type of objective, perhaps, he decides to remove it and thus makes it quote unquote timeless, and makes it perhaps all the more accessible to certain audiences who might not have otherwise gravitated towards it because of maybe certain language choices. So this is very, very interesting choice that Michael Schultz makes here, and his explanation, I think, is it could be one of the reasons why this film has such a long-lasting longevity, indeed, in terms of its cinematic legacy. So, but in any event, that's one aspect that he discusses with it's very interesting. Another aspect too is the way in which he was trying very consciously to depict what Raquel Gates and Michael Schultz here describe about capturing African American life, or aspects of African American youth, or in particular, a little bit later in the conversation, asking about the bonds between men and the emotional relationship between men, and the depiction, therefore, of African American masculinity in cinema in the 1970s, and how this film, Cooley High, is on the one hand part of that trajectory, but also it's making a sort of different depiction of this, especially when, as Raquel Gates and Michael Schultz mentioned here as examples during the period, contemporary examples of, say, superheroes in the sense of the blaxploitation cinema traditions that we'd seen maybe in the early 1970s, and how in many respects Cooley High is very distinct and unique and different from that type of cinema tradition, because we have very sensitively drawn portraits of our main characters, who are, of course, engaged in aspects of, again, they are themselves also seen to be exploring their masculinities in their own individual ways. Sometimes they quote unquote succeed, sometimes they quote unquote don't succeed, but in the context of the film, of course, and that leads to potentials of, say, dramatic tension and comic hijinks, but also they form the basis of portraits of masculinity, and portraits of masculinity that are presented in this sort of emotionally based way, which I think is it's been described here and also elsewhere as being kind of groundbreaking, and it's this is kind of landmark filmmaking in that way. The legacy of this film is so long lasting. One of the reasons for which, of course, being the way in which these characters are depicted. So, and also African American life too. This is another key aspect which I didn't realize until I had been exploring the supplements of this release, which is, and also Raquel Gates too mentions this as well, that she too was, she found herself being surprised about how when she's watching the film, she then was reminded about how a lot of the film does take place in this area of Chicago, Cabrini Green, which has a reputation, which had and has a reputation in terms of being an area which has maybe a reputation for, say, gangs and gangland activity, and also crime and criminal activity and the like. Whereas the film and characters that are seen to be living in this area, in this environment, are really, this is kind of, the depiction of this area is very much, home is where the heart is. There's an earnest nature of the way in which Cabrini Green and the homes of Preach and others and their family lives are depicted. That's so welcoming and so nurturing and so warm and lovely. I mean, details of like the children, the babies, and the letter and the light, and these are lovely details. And so, what Raquel Gates and Michael Schultz, and in fact some of the other supplements to reveal, is that this is being told from this area, and it's almost in a way sort of flying in the face of this type of maybe media-driven or media-generated reputation that Cabrini Green had, whereas the film and the story that it's telling, while it doesn't shy away 100% from certain, say, aspects of danger or risk that are inherent to the plot itself and the characters of Preach and Cochise and the kind of certain adventures that they get into. But also, at the same time, as I say, it never loses sight of the fact that this is a film that is focusing in on the earnest nature of these lives, these human beings, so brilliantly rendered and shown. So this type of warmth of drama and type of homecoming atmosphere, I think, is so key, while also never losing sight of those details that make it, I think, very maybe a type of maybe authentic experience. I don't know if, or maybe for a better phrase, an experience that is very earnest and very much from the heart. And so, from the heart, a story that is almost very proudly taking place in Chicago, in the Cabrini Green area, but it's taking place in a way that's also showing a lot of heart and a lot of hope and a lot of aspirations of these people who are then depicted with three dimensions and as human beings, and as human beings with emotions and also with feelings and also with hopes and dreams. And those dreams might either be realized or might either be shattered, but that's always within the consistent frame of the storytelling itself of Cooley High. So this is a really powerful point of the film and the discussion of the film that. And also, it also allows for certain details, autobiographical details. You know, some of the we also understand that some of the actors who were chosen for some of the roles actually came from the community itself. So, some of the key roles of, say, Stone and Robert, these we understand from Michael Schultz here and other supplements, they came from the actual community because there needed to be a sense of kind of authenticity and type of truth to the characters that they were portraying. And Michael Schultz realized that the only way he could do that was to essentially hire people from the community. And he also realizes that afterwards that they were actually members of certain gang groups. And so that then through a bit, this type of casting allowed for certain ease of location shooting within Cabrini Green. So a very interesting set of details, the behind the scenes production and making of the film. And also it adds to what one might call the sense of the story that is told from the heart, and earnestly portrayed story from the heart as a type of slice of life that is filled with life. So, and the lives of these people. And there are senses, there's also details that he mentions here in this conversation about how we have there's details about the crew, and a lot of the crew members were white, and then a lot of the actors were African American, were black, and so and they're from Cabrini Green, and so some of the crew members, there was a little bit of Michael Schultz recognized that at first there was a bit of maybe some lack of communication, or maybe the Cabrini Green community needed to get used to these crew members. And there was one anecdote about a policeman that was part of, say, the crew in terms of directing traffic or something of that sort. And so there was a little bit of an anecdote involving someone recognizing that policeman in terms of a very high profile bust. And so that needed to be smoothed over in terms of relations between the community and the crew. But that again, through that and other details like the hiring of certain non-professional actors from the community to play key roles in the film, this provided for a very smooth relationship between the people who were making the film and also the community that was the subject of the film. So a very, very fascinating behind the scenes discussion of this. And also too, there's some discussions about behind the scenes in terms of how the studio reacted to certain casting choices. Garrett Morris, too, who plays a really key role here. There was some maybe resistance at first as to maybe his casting, and he mentions how Michael Schultz mentions here how maybe the studio had certain expectations about the casting of that role in terms of someone like, say, Sidney Poitier. But in fact, Garrett Morris had so much real life experience in the role as this teacher, but also a really key figure in the community, as well as giving that type of acting sensibility, that wonderful on-screen persona that Garrett Morris has, which makes him the perfect ideal person to play Mr. Mason. So those interesting anecdotes as well, very, very fascinating indeed. Also, I mentioned too that while it might be said that the film Cooley High doesn't directly focus on, say, race or race relations, it is part of the tapestry in certain scenes, for sure. But also, Michael Schultz mentions too about there were some interesting discussions had between him and say studio side about certain casting choices, and certain casting choices that also had to do with how maybe executives viewed African Americans with a certain skin complexion. And so this was also providing the opportunity for discussion about identity and racial identity and a type of sense of identity, how it's also a discussion that could be within the context of skin complexion as well. And that is something that maybe was not evident, or was not, there were maybe some people on the executive side that weren't necessarily conscious of this type of consideration. But it is there within the film. But it's also something that is not, again, a direct focus of the film per se. It's not one of the direct motivations of the film. It is an aspect of the film that is there. But it's also, again, a film that could be said to be about a community and also about slices of lives. So, which is also filled with life. So these behind the scenes production anecdotes, I think, are very fascinating, and this is one of the reasons that I recommend this discussion with Michael Schultz so strongly. There are also some discussions too about Michael Schultz's own background, his theater background, studying theater at Marquette, and also how he needed in order to graduate, he also needed to study other aspects of theater in terms of acting as well. But this also gave him insight into how to work with performers and actors, which helped him throughout his film career. He also talks too about certain cinema influences that he had. He mentions watching movies a lot. There's a certain scene in Cooley High that he says is a kind of a reference, paying homage to a scene from a Federico Fellini film called Amarcord, in terms of the school setting and a jar of ink. So it's really quite lovely in that way. And also, too, Raquel Gates emphasizes how she really admires so many things about this film, including the way in which this film is showing the bonds between men. And the way, and this is another expression of masculinity, of African American masculinity, but also of masculinity in general, which is a very emotional and resonant way of telling the story, as well as to other aspects of the filmmaking, like the choice of Motown songs, and also interactions with other filmmakers. There's a really lovely anecdote that Michael Schultz shares about John Singleton. And others. So this is, wow, what a great conversation this is with Michael Schultz. Again, strongly recommended. This is from 2022, Remembering Cooley High, approximately 35 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have a 9-minute, a short, maybe a documentary, or a brief documentary too, or it's called The Cooley High Story from 2017, which is described as being a little short from a Turner TCM, Turner Classic Movies, and again 9 minutes. And here we have a number of people and admirers of the film, including Michael Schultz, talking about some of the details that actually emerged in the earlier supplement with Raquel Gates. But here we have some other details that are again discussed or being discussed again, such as the casting of professional actors, but also non-professional actors. In particular, the casting of the key roles or the key characters of Stone and Robert, and also the use of the Motown music, and also the depictions of Cabrini Green, and how this is again an earnest, from the heart depiction of this place and this world and these people and this community in this heartfelt way. And it's not drawn in 2 dimensions, but it's drawn in very multi dimensions, 3 dimensions, and a warmth and a loveliness about it. So a number of the points were discussed in the previous 2022 supplement, but it's great to get this perspective. Also, there's some other people that are speaking during this 9 minute or so supplement, so you can get also a fresh perspective too, and the celebration, how important Cooley High is in terms of the landscape of cinema of 1970s and also 20th century cinema writ large. It's really fascinating that way. It's also a great way to understand and appreciate the legacy and how people celebrate the legacy of this film, Cooley High. So this is the Cooley High story from 2017, approximately 9 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we have an Academy Awards tribute, or Academy tribute. This is from 2019, and this is a kind of an onstage panel discussion, Q&A discussion at a theater screening, and this is hosted by or moderated by the great Robert Townsend. Oh, it's so great to see him here, because and he's speaking with Michael Schultz, and also Garrett Morris is there, and also Lawrence Hilton Jacobs is there, and also Jackie Taylor. And there's a moment where Jackie Taylor is given the opportunity to speak about her work with the community and theater, and how she admires this film so much. Cooley High gave her so many opportunities. Also, she's from Cabrini Green, so she really loves how this film is telling a heartfelt story set in Cabrini Green in this way that is so filled with a lot of, say, love and care. As well as her own work with the community. So that's one great aspect of this. Also, to hear Michael Schultz, and also Gloria Schultz as well, is invited on stage, and she speaks too about some of the aspects of casting choices, and also working in Chicago, working with Michael Schultz, etc. And also a family connection too is made too with another person that's asked to participate on the stage panel, Garrett Morris. Oh, it's so great to see Garrett Morris there, and to see him and to hear his just almost no holds barred takes on this film. He loves this film so much, and he has this great admiration for Michael Schultz. And he says, Michael Schultz should be is one of the great filmmakers of his generation. He should be celebrated more, and his films should be discussed more. It's great that this type of discussion is being had. And bravo, yes, bravo to Garrett Morris and others for making those comments with such enthusiasm and conviction. It's really, truly the case indeed. And it's releases like this with discussions like this that really make the case so strongly, and rightly so. So that's another great aspect of it. And also, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, there's a great little connection, or there's this discussion about swear words. And Michael Schultz and Lawrence Hilton, it's wonderful. It's so great, so endearing. And it also shows a bit of Michael Schultz's personality as well, which is so lovely. Absolutely. And of course, Michael Schultz is allowed once again to speak about certain aspects of the film, some of which have been brought up as well. There's a detail too about how reality is captured. There's a little scene involving the mother, and some dialogue that is heard that she's speaking. I don't want to give too much away, again, for the benefit of those who have yet to see this beautiful film, but there's a scene, and it's using dialogue that was actually looped from the actor's own, say, words that she was saying during one of the shoots where she was just tired, but it was then used as part of her character in one key scene, and it's so moving. And it shows a type of depth of humanity of her character in a way that's just so powerful. And it's just to know that it came from this almost kind of chance moment during a bit of downtime in the shoot, That is so remarkable, and again shows the type of flexibility that the filmmakers had, and also the way in which they were using actual aspects of the shoot itself and people's lives in a way to fashion these stories in a very effective way. So these and other anecdotes are shared in this Academy tribute. And I should say also another thing too, Robert Townsend, he's moderating this with such love and admiration. You see him, and when more people are on the stage, he said, "No." He stands up. He gives his chair to Gloria Schultz, and just the way you know that he loves this film. So he says, "This is a game changer. This is a groundbreaking film," and he's saying it gave so much opportunity, and it gave so much sense of promise and the scope of cinema and type of inspiration for filmmakers like him, for other filmmakers of his generation. John Singleton is mentioned as well at the outset too, as a type of to respect the memory, and also to remind us too that filmmakers like John Singleton and Robert Townsend and others were inspired by Michael Schultz and Cooley High, etc. So, it's so lovely to see Robert Townsend, and he's speaking so much, and then there's a point where we have to wrap up. They're telling us to go. So thank you very much. So you can tell he could just go. His enthusiasm and love for this film is boundless, which is so great. Absolutely great. So it's great to see Robert Townsend in this manner, and to see him talk about this film with Michael Schultz and company again during this Academy tribute. It's an hour and 6 minutes, so it's great, but it goes by so quickly, and it's just it's like a warm, lovely afternoon talking about this great example of cinema. So and hosted by Robert Townsend. So the Academy tribute from 2019, approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes. So that rounds out the supplements. And so I think maybe on paper, one can see that maybe in terms of quantity, maybe this release has, relatively speaking, less amount of supplements than, say, other Criterion releases. I certainly feel that way. I would have loved to have seen more supplements, that's for sure. Maybe other discussions, maybe other aspects about this film, maybe a commentary track. That would have been so cool. Of course, it would have been great to see those. But what we get here is outstanding. And it does celebrate the legacy of this film. And it makes me so, I just remember watching the supplements through the first time. And I just felt so excited all over again for this film. And I had to watch the film again. It was that amazing. So what we do get is stellar, and it does remind us, it reminds me of just why I'm so happy that this film is in the Criterion collection, and why I'm so happy to be able to watch this film again and again. So, and I learned so much from these. So it's great. While it would have been nice to have had other things, what we do get in terms of supplements, what we get is great. So I strongly recommend this if you have the opportunity. And so now let us turn to the packaging and the cover art design and the essay and the insert here. So the cover art design, I love this. This is great at depicting two of the main characters here with Cooley High, and the font. Oh, I love that. And the font too is replicated in the back here in terms of the appearance of the title on top there. Oh, so wonderful. The drawing, the scale, the detail. Top-notch stuff indeed. And so I just point out here that the art directors, Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustration, Manasseh Johnson Sr., and designer, Eric Skillman. So this is really, really fantastic indeed. I love this. And we see here too an interesting layout in terms of, say, pictures from collage pictures from in one page of the film, and also note here for those who this page, which is kind of a facsimile, handwritten note facsimile. Very interesting stuff indeed. So remember too, there's a key aspect of one of the main characters in terms of writing, in terms of poetry. So really very cool indeed. So there's a type of living, a sense of characters living through the Criterion materials themselves, which is a really interesting detail. Now, speaking of the fold-out here, or what else we see, it is a fold-out. I'm not a fan of the fold-out. I much rather prefer to have seen the staple booklet. So that's something that I say every time I see a fold-out. But also, there is a great essay. It's from Craigh Barboza, and this is Young, Gifted, and Black. And this is another great one. Again, Cooley High, there's so many points, there's so many learning points, there's so many points of kind of illumination in terms of the discovery of this film or rediscovery of this film, or for, in my case, discovering points for the first time and just being totally blown away by that. And a wonderful place, a source for that too, is this essay, Young, Gifted, and Black. It is going through sort of the context of this film, the significance of this film in the context of 1970s cinema, coming in 1975, the way in which it sort of celebrates a sense of identity and youth, and also a sense of music and culture, and also a sense of storytelling, earnestness that is very powerfully told, and also very honestly told, and also very, very effectively told. And so for these and other reasons, this is another great essay. Please check it out if you can. It's called Young, Gifted, and Black. My recommendation, my strong recommendation, is to watch the film first, and then after you've seen the film, you can then visit this great essay, which is part of this Criterion release. So, my dear friends, this is Cooley High, which is now in the Criterion collection. Again, spine number 1165. Please check it out if you can. It is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad, I'm so happy it's in the Criterion collection in this way. And so with that, my dear friends, thank you very much. So until we see each other again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.